All right, well, let's talk about scaling. So, what is the current scale of Care Academy as far as the size of the company, employee wise, but then the scale of what you're already providing, the number of caregivers that you're giving this
Yeah,
training to?
we think about it from a caregiver first and customer first approach, right? And so we're roughly 1,300 customers, 250,000 direct care workers served. There are thousands of caregivers that are coming in on a monthly basis, and that's just predicated on the number of customers that we're signing up. And so, in terms of scaling, we saw that, as I mentioned at the very top of the call, exacerbated by way of COVID, of home care agencies and home health agencies and other organizations more upmarket, right? And so hospital systems who had identified that they had always been leaning or thinking about a healthcare in community approach, but now they really had no choice but to depend on that. And so, how do we at Care Academy think of enabling their frontline workers that they don't have day-to-day contact with out in the field, and this goes back to staying ready so you don't have to get ready. But we were able to talk to those organizations about how we help them streamline the most important functions that they have, because they're essentially services oriented, right? We're relying on people. And so everything end to end, we just wanted to be out in front supporting our customers with. And so it was building the organization and the way we think about even into 2022 and beyond. What do we think is happening on behalf of the caregivers and the customers, the agencies, the health organizations that we support, and how do we have to wrap our arms around not only being reactive but really being proactive? And we're in an inflection point as an organization. I think at very early stages, you're not proactive. You should not be proactive because your runway probably can't afford to do that. So being mindful of that. But you get to a certain inflection point or an orientation in the market that you're really kind of looking just beyond or just ahead as a leader within the organization and saying, how do we, Care Academy shows up within the, top two customer sets across these different respective fields. How do we push the opportunity forward and push the industry forward, right? And then that's a lot of fun to also think about and balance with the things that we need to respectively do to scale, within our product. But it's thinking about and sort of holding the space for that. And as you grow as a company into sort of the later stages, you as a CEO and your leadership team can be more mindful of that, right? Rather than sort of the now, I have to be looking out sort of just ahead at what our world looks like in December of 2022 and 5 years beyond that. And I love doing that sort of thinking and exercise with our team.
And has there been anything that's been unique as far as your model? I'm sure there's different types of organizations that could be your customer. There could be, larger caregiver organizations, and then there's probably a lot of smaller ones. So how do you think about where is your time spent best as far as pushing Care Academy forward?
Yeah, that's a great question, Keith. I think for founders generally, because I want to say things that are specific to Care Academy, maybe some lessons that can be extrapolated from our lesson, is refining as you grow who your customer is. When we started, right, it was sort of a catch-all. You're running as a startup to find your product market fit. And we found that the opportunity was really in coalescing home care agencies. And we've done that to great effect. And we've improved the mechanisms in which we're coalescing the market and bringing in more agencies to partner with us in helping to, improve how their caregivers are getting trained and their operational efficiency and their ability to care for the end recipient of care. So the client, their own clients. But what we've learned in the last 12 months, so this was all happening in real time, and I gasp at the fact that this happened. But while we were announcing a Series A, or while we were sort of getting and working alongside our agencies and stakeholders on COVID and what this pandemic meant and signaling that to the market, we were also in the midst of thinking about how we orient pricing. So we worked with a really great organization here in Boston to essentially say, let's take a step back from our assumptions about the market. a lot of that is informed by our own biases, right? And so I always say to founders, you are the first head of product, you are the first salesperson. At some point in your organization and your maturity, you need to start opening up sort of the conduits of information gathering in order for you to make much more informed decisions. And that's what I just determined needed to be done within our organization. We needed to step back and say, okay, healthcare is changing, home care is changing, the landscape is changing. How do we step back and think about who our customers are and what we know about them and the assumptions we're making about them? And we did just that over the course of like 6 to 8 months of just doing this wonderful exercise and inviting this objective stakeholder. And that can be an advisor, that can be an advisory board, that can be your board. For us, it was a mixture of different stakeholders, and just created a set of assumptions around who those people were based on, hundreds of points of data that we were using to inform that. And then we effectively said, all right, like, how do we map our go-to-market? I was talking to a banker who is really familiar with startups, and she said one of the common mistakes that startups don't make is that their go-to-market doesn't grow up with the company, right? And so you still have a level of catch-up. And so what I'd caution folks who are doing that level of scaling, especially if you're B2B SaaS, looking at what are you internalizing about your customers? We had to completely internalize a set of new assumptions, and those are going to change annually, right? Those are changing in real time in the fourth quarter of this year. And then we apportioned our go-to-market to react to that, right? So, not only SMBs, but also enterprises that we're selling to, really understanding their needs and internalizing that within the company. So I say, always check your assumptions. And the safe bet is to do that every single year around who your customer is, especially if you're at the point of product market fit in your industry.
Yeah, and it's something that is mentioned as advice over and over again, but I think sometimes people just either are too busy and forget, or they just don't know if it's that important. But always talk to your customers. They're the ones that are
That's right.
ultimately your lifeblood of what you do. So talk to them and figure out based on what we're providing, is it useful? Is it valuable? Could you not live without us, type of thing? What are things that we could be doing better? Like, just customer discovery calls are so important.
Yeah. And I'll even add, like, that
Yeah,
needs to be
please.
baked into the DNA at all times, right? So I set aside an hour to at least every month where we're calling customers, even cold. It doesn't have to be a whole show, just to make sure that they know not only that we care, but we're hearing, and I retain a sense firsthand of what are the needs of the customers, right? So I say, no matter what stage, you're never too old, in my opinion, as a company, to do that.
Yeah, and the leadership team needs to be doing it.
Right.
It's all about the customer. Without the customer,
Right.
your business will
That's
not
right.
float. But one of the things that you mentioned before is pricing, and that's something that you were able to figure out through. I think you said there was a company in Boston that helped you. So that's something that founders also struggle with, and I know it's something that I always think about. It's like, do you have the right pricing model? Is it so how did you come to that ends result of, okay, we're in good shape as it relates to our pricing, our margin, profits, and all that?
Yeah, and the answer is, you're never in good shape, right? It is always you're in better shape than you were. And so one of the things that I've learned a lot from other founders and through the organization that we work with, is that year after year, it is a lot of companies, even very scaled ones, make the mistake of not looking at their pricing and packaging, right? It sort of sits as sort of the static archive, right, of what you assume your customers want, what you assume, how much of it do they want, is really kind of stuck there. And so we've taken a look, and it is by way of an annual practice. And right about this time, that feeds into mechanizing all of really go to market for us. And so we take a look at how are we aligned? So the first question is, are we aligned from our abilities, our roadmap, and with our customers, right? Are we providing them what they need and what the market has told us that they need? And more often than not, this is not information gathering that you have to go just seek high and low, more often than not, you actually have all the information that you need, right? It's opening up your Salesforce or your HubSpot and seeing sort of what is being reported back to you when you're losing deals, right? It is also by way of Zendesk tickets. It's so we think about accreting all of the information and really making sure that from a value proposition standpoint, we can really stand behind where our pricing and packaging and where value is, especially if you're building and investing in product over time. Does that match up to the landscape of what customers are expecting, and what are their other options other than you? So I think pricing and packaging is always be repricing and repackaging. That doesn't roll off the tongue as well as always be selling, but always be repricing and repackaging.